Hi there, I'm Scott Lowe with Actual Tech Media, and thank you for joining us for today's special launch event. This webinar is entitled Ejecting from the 9 Circles of Tape Hell. We're providing this presentation in partnership with FalconStor. FalconStor is pleased to announce today the release of StoreSafe, a revolutionary new way to help you better manage your data protection and archive requirements. We have a number of special guests today from both FalconStor as well as from customers. And this is going to be a great event for you to learn about what FalconStor is bringing to the world. On your screen, you can see we have a number of special guests today. First of all, we have Mark Delsman, who is the head of engineering at FalconStor. We'll also be speaking with Abdul Hashmi, who is the head of professional services at FalconStor. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll have a special guest from Blue Chip named Mike Borum, who is a technical lead for that company. Blue Chip is a UK service provider that has literally hundreds of customers using the FalconStor StoreSafe solution and many petabytes of storage under management with FalconStor StoreSafe. On your screen, you can see we have a robust agenda. We'll start with some housekeeping, after which we'll talk about the historical role of tape with folks from FalconStor. We'll also then talk about some of the next decade issues, the backup and archived transformations that are going to be required for organizations to continue to meet their data protection goals. We'll then unveil FalconStor StoreSafe, after which I'll provide you with some thoughts and clarity on the solution. Throughout the event, we'll do some polls and some gift cards, and we'll do that right after my thoughts. And after that, we'll do some Q&A with the FalconStor gentleman to get a better understanding for what StoreSafe brings to the world. After that, we'll talk to Blue Chip. As I mentioned, Blue Chip is a UK service provider with hundreds of petabytes of FalconStor StoreSafe capacity under management. Then we'll do a Q&A with Blue Chip from you, and then we'll end the event with some polls and a final Amazon gift card. So I mentioned that housekeeping, just did some introductions. We'll be doing some introductions again shortly when I bring our friends onto the event. If you have questions, we want to hear from you. Please use the questions button in your console to ask good questions of our presenters for today. You'll also see some handouts on the Handouts tab. Make sure you take a look at those. And there's a series of prizes that we'll be going through on today's event as well. First of all, there's one of 2 $300 Amazon gift cards coming your way if you're one of the 2 lucky winners. Please make sure you meet the ATM prize terms and conditions as you'll find on the Handouts tab. We'll be awarding these randomly to a lucky winner or to 2 lucky winners at 2 points during today's event. But we also want to incentivize great questions from our audience. If you ask the best question, in our sole opinion, you could win a $50 Amazon gift card. All you've got to do is ask a great question, and we will choose a winner after today's event, and we'll notify you if you are the lucky winner. There's no need to ask about it in the Q&A. Winners will be notified after today's event if they were chosen as a winner for one of the gift cards that we have available for today. And let's get started with a trip down memory lane. I'm joined right now by Mark Delsman, who's the Vice President for Product and Engineering for FalconStor, and Abdul Hashmi, who's the Vice President for Customer Success. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today.
Glad to be here, Scott.
Thanks for having us.
Mark, hey, I'm happy to have you guys here. This is going to be a great discussion. This is something that, for years, organizations have, used tape for lots of different reasons. But let's take, sort of a journey down to the past a little bit and talk about sort of why. So why did organizations choose tape? What's the role of tape been historically in customer environments? Mark, let's start with you.
Sure, Scott. So if we look historically, organizations wanted to make sure that they had an offsite copy of their data in case disaster struck or whatever. And tapes provided that portable method to put a lot of data in one place and get it offsite. So a lot of business processes grew up around tape and using tape. It was also considered a very cost-effective solution for getting that extra, backup copy of your data. So it was the portability and the cost that I think really fueled tape over time.
Yeah, as a lot of organizations, most organizations adhere to what we've come to know as the 3-2-1 rule, right? 3 copies, 2 media types, 1 offsite location somewhere of data. Abdul, when you think about some of the customers you talk to in your role as VP of Customer Success, what are some of the things they like about tape and some of their original reasons for having adopted tape infrastructures?
Yeah, so like Mark mentioned, it's the economics. That's how they initially started off with the tapes. But the cloud storage decreasing in price and the software and the technology improving and giving them those capabilities obviously has its disadvantages. It's error prone. Your backups are as good as your restore, and the restore time for tapes, physical tapes, is way higher than you would do from a virtual tape. So those are some of the challenges. They want to streamline and their backup environment and be able to see where their backups are. On the tapes, if somebody has labeled them correctly, you would just hope that they have labeled them correctly. But with a software solution, you get to see everything in a console.
Yeah, I remember the days of having to label tapes and just hoping that I wouldn't make a mistake. So if I ever had to recover that, I wouldn't pay the price on the line. But when I think about tape, I mean, I actually, I don't hate tape. I'm actually someone who has appreciated what tape brought to the table. And I think some of the points that Mark made around the benefits of tapes, it's portability. I mean, you can pick up a tape and walk out of the data center, which is good and bad, actually. But from a security perspective, that can be problematic. But when you think about the sheer density of tape, especially as we see, new generations of LTO and things like that, it's pretty incredible just how much you can cram onto a tape, between that density and some of the new compression technologies that we see on data. So, I mean, it's still an enviable, sort of media today, even when organizations start to look at other solutions for how to store that data. Mark, what are some of your thoughts on some of those benefits of tape that you still see out there today?
Well, there's no doubt that the tape industry continues to improve the density, and as they have for years and years and years. A flip side to that, though, is you also have to make sure you manage your historical data, because at some point those tapes start fading out, not only from the data that's written on them, just as for everybody that remembers the old VCRs at home, right? That data over time is going to fade some, and you're also going to want to make sure you stay on a current generation of the tape, so that you're keeping up with current tape drives, tape libraries, and that too. So while there is advantages to being portable and a very well understood technology, you also have to maintain that.
Yeah, and that's been one of the big I would say hurdles for a lot of organizations that want to make any kind of change to their backup environment, whether it's a new generation of a tape library to get benefits of newer generations of tape, or even a software change. There's a need then to keep, a lot of organizations keep old tape drives around just because they have old tapes. They want to make sure they can still read them, because backward compatibility is not always a given, which is unfortunate. You also end up in situations where when people change software, right, then you're going to have to keep old software around to make sure that you can recover particularly old technologies. And I think your point about degradation of the media is a really important one. Abdul, what are some of your thoughts? How long does tape last when it's sitting in a storage environment?
Well, typically the claim is it lasts up to 30 years, but you need that environment in terms of temperature, the humidity, everything being 100% correct to be able to reach those sorts of limit. So it does have a longer lifespan compared to disk, for example, given, like I said, if the environment is correct. But again, I just want to point out to what Mark mentioned. This is one thing of it. What the organizations or what we hear from customers, what they want is be able to drive analytics from their data, something you cannot do from tape backups, because these are just sitting on the shelf. And a lot of customers, they make their business decisions based on the data they have. Remember, your data is your asset, and they want to be able to use it instead of sitting there. So there's a lot of pros and cons to using one versus the other, but clearly from what we hear from customers is they need to be able to see and make some business decisions and run some analytic and reporting on the data that they have. That's critical.
So let's drive down on some of the emerging requirements that we see around, and maybe not emerging, but emergent requirements that we see around data protection and archive today, and where we start to see some of the holes in the armor of tape. I think you just mentioned one, and that's essentially visibility. I mean, in a sense, you have metadata that's stored somewhere, but you still don't know necessarily physically where a tape is all the time, unless you have really good inventory and really good processes. And that's problematic because if you can't find a tape, you can't record, you can't restore, and that's generally considered bad. And when we start to think about the analytics piece that you mentioned, how much are we actually storing? How much are we actually backing up? And are we remaining compliant with data, data laws and things like that? Are we, all these questions come up. And so when we start to think about tape environments, Mark, what are some of the other challenges that organizations are trying to overcome with tape environments that are easier to do when you start thinking about disk or cloud-based backup? I mean, what are some of the reasons that they're adopting these other technologies?
Well, Scott, one that we just really hit us the last 12 months with COVID affecting all the businesses is people didn't want employees in their data center. And, the transportation of physical media offsite also means people had to be coming in and handling things. We actually found that there was a lot of interest in being able to move sections of company archives off of tape this last year, just because they wanted to eliminate the employees, not eliminate them, but eliminate at least the manual process that involved employees. So we had a lot of activity this last year just because of that very reason. I would say a second challenge with it is just the I think Abdul mentioned this earlier, just the delay, because people were involved in the process. You had to have a service go fetch the tape from offsite if you needed to do a recovery, and your recovery time objective has to be considered much longer if you do get into the position you have to go offsite to recover it.
Yeah, and that's really the key, isn't it? I mean, there's those two things you just mentioned, in addition to personnel not being able to go into the data center, there's also, as we alluded to earlier, a security component to that. I mean, if somebody can walk in and grab tapes, they can be lost, they can be stolen, and obviously, this is where we see some, companies literally bringing armored trucks to headquarters to pick up tapes because that's, the data is that critical and that sensitive. That gets expensive, and the human cost is high, and there's also that in-person component that, increasingly remote organizations don't want to encumber themselves with. But I think that the operational component to that, the RTO, the RPO, you're never going to get to modern RTO, RPO standards with a tape environment alone. There might be some, place for tape in archive environments, like long-term archive, but Abdul, when you think about customers' requirements around RTO and RPO, what are some of the trends you've seen in the past few years that are kind of forcing this, looking again at the backup environment to try to make things better?
So, going back to my original point is their recovery point objective is to make sure that they have the data available and their restores are good, right? Having some sort of validation. I have my backups, I can run some validation report, and they're all good. And so that time is critical for them, as opposed to having it fetched from, physical tape. You bring it from an Iron Mountain, load it into the library and then do the restore, and you hope you labeled it right and you restored that. So there's a lot of, it's error prone. It's a lot of time consuming. Clearly they want to shorten that and get that from newer technologies that give them the best RPO and RTO.
And so that's why they're turning to disk, they're turning to cloud to enable those kind of business operations. Now, as we look at this shift, we see enterprises, they're not just running, in many cases, a single backup tool, right? They're running, a combination of different vendor solutions for different business units, different needs that a particular tool may be particularly good at addressing. When we start to think about, now not thinking about what FalconStor brings to the table yet, but when customers are starting to engage FalconStor, particularly when they're looking at environments where there are multiple backup tools, Mark, what are some of the challenges that they're seeing because of the fact that they're running these multiple backup tools, and especially when they really don't want to get rid of them? So what challenges are they trying to overcome?
Yeah, that's a great question, because any modern or complex enterprise today has grown up over time, right? And they've got a lot of legacy systems. Virtually no customer is interested in rip and replace approaches to it. There'll be, maybe a newer division that started up, or a newer site that is, say, running off of Veeam. You may have a different site that has IBM I equipment and has been running IBM's BRMS as the backup environment. And there may be, the engineering group went renegade a few years back and started using Commvault for their backups. That is normal in what we see in the enterprise today. And each one of those vendors I talked about have perfectly good backup software, but it doesn't integrate with anybody else's, especially on the back end. So you end up, if you are sending tapes off-site from all these different environments, they're all different. And you have to make sure you're very good at organizing them. It puts a lot of pressure on the IT administrator also. So you see these enterprises struggling to figure out, is there a way we could simplify this? Is there a way we don't have to buy new tape libraries for every environment? Is there a way we can consolidate, at least on the back end, and not force our divisions, our sites to rip and replace what they currently have?
Yeah, go ahead, Abdul. I apologize.
Yeah, I was just gonna add to what Mark was saying, and just relates to me. Just a couple of days ago, we were talking to a customer who's using our solution, StoreSafe solution, for BRMS. They're backing up to us. Now, the other division of their using Veeam, and so they engaged us. We want to point our Veeam solution also. Have FalconStor. What is our path? Can we deploy another FalconStor solution? I said, no, you just pointed to that already solution you have. So this is where we shine, right? Because you could have a complex environment on the front end, all can be pointed to the same StoreSafe solution. Ingest can be coming, and you get the benefit of a global deduplication repository across all your workloads.
Abdul, you just previewed what we're going to actually be announcing right now, which is the StoreSafe solution from FalconStor. Some of the big challenges that we just talked about are things like being able to stay application agnostic when it comes to support for the storage infrastructure for data protection and archival needs. Being able to stay hardware agnostic to a point where you can use whatever hardware makes sense, whether that's on-premises disk, whether that's still a tape library, or whether that's the cloud as a backup target. But when we think about the things that customers are trying to accomplish, Mark, what would you say are the top, 3 or 4 things that FalconStor is bringing to the table with StoreSafe that really help these organizations maximize the investments they've already made in their data protection and archival environments, and to be able to better adhere to the emerging requirements that we just talked about?
Yeah, I think there's a handful of them that are the key shopping points or the key indicators that customers look for. Number one is performance. You have to be very efficient about the backup window. Enterprises expect to be able to dump a lot of data, now more than ever, dump a lot of data and be back to compute with their environments. Our StoreSafe product can accept per node 40 terabytes an hour of data, which can significantly reduce the backup windows. And Abdul's got plenty of stories about how that's improved situations at our customers. The second one is we talked about the various environments that customers are backing up. So having these different solutions, being able to direct them at one solution so that we can consolidate all those different backup streams. We can do a global deduplication across it for the lowest back-end cost, if you will. And the third one I would say is the flexibility. We are agnostic to what hardware we're running on. We could also just run in a VM if that's the preferred solution. So different hardware, different VM, a variety of different backup softwares that can all direct towards us, and a variety on the back end. If you still want to output to physical tape and take it offsite, fine, we can certainly do that. But we can also export deduplicated containers out of the back to the cloud, whether that's on-prem or one of the commercial cloud vendors. So we give you plenty of flexibility for configuring it, but by doing this global deduplication and this one central point that you could dump all your backups to, we can also do it in the most cost-effective manner for an enterprise.
So if I'm understanding it correctly, essentially the way that the FalconStor StoreSafe solution is deployed, it essentially appears in these other backup tools as a virtual tape library, and then you just manage what actually all of the outputs are from there. Is that accurate?
That is correct. Yes. Yeah. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, we look like a tape library. We support probably 60 different tape drives or tape libraries where we can emulate them, where you can consolidate all your backup environment. We also give you a single management console that can control all of this. And Abdul has some great stories about simplifying customer environments, but think of it as before you had your Veeam environment, your Commvault environment, your BRMS environment. Now you just have one screen, and your IT admin can be sitting at home controlling all of that environment through that one screen.
Abdul, let's hear some of those customer stories. When you think about sort of the most gratifying customer story, the most challenging customer story that was brought to you that StoreSafe was able to help address, what does that look like, and what were some of the technical and business outcomes that customer was able to achieve?
So one of the key things that StoreSafe brings to the table, it doesn't require you as a customer to just do that, go with that process. Whether you're moving to the cloud, you don't have to move today. You can move certain workloads, whether you want to import from the physical tape library and move it to the cloud. We give you the flexibility. So we have customers who, for example, deploy StoreSafe. Yeah, their intention is to go to the cloud, but they don't want to do it day one. That's okay. You can use StoreSafe. You still have the global data deduplication repository that you can take advantage. Whenever you're ready, whatever workload you're ready for, you can take it to a cloud of your choice. Azure, AWS, Wasabi. We have IBM cloud. We have certified with many clouds. So it's that flexibility and that assurance that as a customer I can have that. Yeah, I got this. It's a consolidated view. I get 95% reduction in my storage. All my complex environment, all the backups are pointing here. But if I need to, I can go to the cloud. If I need to still go to the physical tapes, FalconStor gives me that ability. So it really, is that assurance that they get from here. But eventually, yes, they move their archives to the cloud in a secure data container format. We take it from cloud to cloud or multiple clouds. So really, it's an enterprise solution. No longer you need array level replication or host level deduplication. In fact, we ask customers to go ahead and turn those deduplication off on the backup software level. Let the backup software do what it's supposed to do, which is to complete your backup in the required window, right? Let all the offloading, the resource intensive operation be offloaded to StoreSafe.
Yeah, because that's interesting, because dedupe and compression operation on the backup software increases the amount of time it takes for a backup to take place. So by
eats into your backup window. Yeah.
Right. So don't do that. We'll take care of it for you. You've solved a key problem that a lot of organizations have around that backup window even today. So,
well, plus, let me add,
oh, go ahead, Mark.
Scott, I was just going to add to it. Not only do you take that off of the backup server, but once again, since we're a global dedupe, we're deduping across a much bigger corpus of data than the individual backup software would be.
And it's
so
very
instead of having those isolations, yeah.
So you probably get pretty insane deduplication rates, I would imagine, correct?
Very much so. Yeah, go ahead, Abdul. What are you seeing in our customers' setups?
Yeah, because thank you, Mark. Because on customers, they have in complex enterprises, they have multiple backup software. So everyone is doing the duplication. Not only it eats up to their backup window, but because it's isolated in itself, it can just do it on the appliance level or that workload level. This one backup software is not aware of the other one. When turning that off, not only you increase your backup window time and let the backup finish on time, but now you let FalconStor deduplicate across, just like what Mark was talking about, across all your workload, be it virtual tape or NAS, or in the future, any other ingest. That's a truly global deduplication repository that you get deduplication all across.
And what kind of deduplication ratios are you seeing in customer environments with the solution?
I have seen customers complaining that their deduplication ratio is too high because we need to size, so 80 to 1 dedupe ratio, all the way down 10 to 1 dedupe ratio. Of course, it depends on the workload that you have, but it's pretty substantial. Nothing you can compare with any backup software level deduplication. Yeah.
So just out of curiosity, why would they complain about that? Do they just not believe it?
They believe it because they see it. But just when it comes to, because it's very complex in terms of how, when you size it, because if there's a lot of variables that go into it. They just had to add another, 5 terabyte of storage for the index, for example, and just because you got a higher deduplication ratio. And so we're like, you're a victim of getting a higher dedupe ratio. Of course, at the end, he was happy that, that he's getting that. And, but yeah, we've seen anywhere from 90 to all the way down 10 across the board.
So, Mark, how does that magic, I mean, when you think about the solution, because you're one of the architects of the solution, how does that happen? Like, how are you making that happen? I mean, it's a huge corpus. It's a dedicated, I mean, it's what the solution is built for, but how is that all being managed? And how are you achieving like some of the goals we talked about earlier?
So a couple of points on that. The first one, if a customer's behavior is to back up the same data over and over again, if they're doing full backups on a regular basis, this deduplication ratio starts off as say 5 to 1 or 8 to 1 or whatever the right number is. But every time you back it up, it's going to be almost all the same data again. And so we'll see these accounts that initially, maybe we sized them for an 8 or a 10 to 1 dedupe, and a month later, all of a sudden we see it start edging way up because of their behavior of just doing full backups far more often than perhaps they need to. But that's fine. We'll take care of that. We'll eliminate it. We'll clean that out and give them just a really efficient level of storage. So their behaviors, a lot of times, and what they're comfortable doing, we can fit into their business processes. We, as a vendor, aren't dictating business processes to them. And I think for a lot of customers, that's a very important attribute. Now, as far as the technology piece of it, in order to get a really world-class dedupe, we do a block level dedupe. We do it at the data, the block data level. But we also take into account that a very common thing to do is to go out and say update files or make incremental changes to files. So you actually have to slide your comparison for dedupe around so that you can find where the remaining data picks up. And then you can go say, okay, if I slide my window out to here, I found the same chunk and now I can dedupe it. So it is a very intelligent, iterative process to get through the data and do the best job at reduction that you can.
And just
Now,
to
when
add to that, in
I
our
apologize.
yeah, just another point on that. In our SIR engine, we have content-aware parsers for every backup, specific to every backup software. And as the backup software improves or changes its architecture, we change that accordingly. And so we don't have just a generic parser that we apply it across all the backup softwares, but we have a particular content-aware specific to backup exec, Veeam, for example, VRMS, TSM. So that is what's giving us also the best data reduction rate in the repository. Yeah.
And in my experience, deduplication improves performance as well, because essentially if you see a block that's duplicated, you just throw it out. I mean, you have to write a pointer, but that's it. So, I mean, the fastest write you can have is one you don't have to do.
Yes, absolutely. On so many levels, actually. Yeah. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, let me add to that, Scott, because you actually brought up an important point that I didn't mention earlier. A lot of our enterprise customers will also replicate their backups to offsite. Instead of sending it out on tape, they'll have like a second data center and they'll make a replica copy. And once you've done a really good job of dedupe and gotten the data down to the smallest point possible, all we replicate to the other data center is the unique changed data, none of the existing data. So this makes your communications link highly efficient also, since you're not sending over terabytes or petabytes of data, you're only sending the very essential new blocks of data over. Now, that being said, a lot of our customers are very interested in kind of eliminating that replica now so that they don't have to maintain a second data center. And they're actually running the replication to the cloud. They'll have a virtual StoreSafe running at AWS as an example, and that will be their second data center at this point. So once again, it's exactly the same business process. They don't have to change their corporate procedures at all, but it's giving them really innovative ways to be able to run this and keep the same high level of protection that they're used to.
Just because it's very critical on this point. I'm sorry, just one point on this one that Mark mentioned. The same deduplication is also applicable to when you containerize out to the cloud. Because you send less data, you save on the bandwidth, but also when you're restoring, you're saving on the egress fees because these cloud providers will charge you that.
Yeah, from a recovery perspective, egress fees are where it's at. I mean, that's going to be pretty important. So Abdul, when you think about, customers, especially ones that are more distributed today, this bandwidth discussion and quality of connectivity concerns in some cases, I would imagine that the solution helps overcome some potential objections people may have around replicating data to another location. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, of course, again, because of our deduplication, we're only sending the unique data. The raw data comes to us, we deduplicate it. So we're sending just a fraction of the data over. This is the local, when we are replicating, we're also scanning the repository of the DR site to make sure that server also doesn't have any deduplicated data. So it's truly unique blocks that we're sending, absolutely taking in that into consideration to save on the bandwidth.
Now, later on, we're going to talk a little bit about sort of how the product works. So we'll save that for right now. But let's just kind of recap what some of the business and technical benefits that we've just discussed look like, especially in the context of sort of this tape hell that we discussed earlier. So some of the challenges organizations were facing were this idea that they couldn't quickly recover from tape because tape was off-site or it was too slow. Another challenge was it was difficult to either adopt a second piece of software or replace hardware because of the need to maintain backward compatibility with older hardware and older software. And a third concern was one around potential having to do a forklift upgrade to make modifications to a data protection or archive environment. I'll start with Mark on this, and then Abdul sort of bounce back and forth a little bit. But what are how is FalconStor, in a summary way here, addressing those key concerns that we talked about before with StoreSafe?
Yeah, Scott, I would also add a fourth that we've talked about, which is security.
Absolutely.
Of your backup and your data too. So with FalconStor, in summary, we've got a software solution that sits on generic hardware that can accept a variety of inputs from different tape backup software vendors, run on a wide variety of hardware or run as a virtual machine. We consolidate the data across all of those different vendors, so we can be the consolidation point for your environment with a single screen that can control the entire environment. And we give you a lot of flexibility and choice of, if you want to archive and send it off-site, a variety of ways to do that. So from a single software solution, we can pull together a bunch of diverse environments in an extremely cost-effective way and give you the flexibility and allow you to add the improvements over time. As Abdul said earlier, if you eventually know you want to go to the cloud but you're not ready, that's fine. You can start today with fitting it into your current environment and make those improvements over time.
Abdul, I have a question for you as a follow-up to that, and that's where we're at the discussion. For this one, it's essentially, we hear all these great benefits of what StoreSafe brings to the table to help overcome these challenges we talked about. How hard is StoreSafe to deploy?
If you ask me, of course, it's not hard. It goes on legacy hardware. You don't have to make changes as a customer to your SAN environment. We work with any SAN storage, for example. We work with regular network configuration that you already have. So there's not any backup infrastructure that you have. Nothing has to change on that front also. So from that perspective, it's very easy to put it in place, start directing workloads to as you feel comfortable, use the rest of the operations and functions like replication or sending data off to the cloud.
Now, essentially, it feels like we're deploying a software that sits alongside everything else. So you don't actually have to change anything you're already doing. You just basically gain a whole lot more benefit and a whole lot more capability. So it sounds like it's super simple to deploy. Find a server, deploy it, and you basically add new backup targets you didn't have before without having to take anything out of the environment. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Nothing needs to change on the front end. All you have to do is just change the path to the new target, which is FalconStor solution.
Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you for this robust discussion. I look forward to bringing some questions from the audience forward to both of you as we go further on in today's event.
Looking forward to it.
And we're going to ask our first poll question of the day. First of all, how much tape are you using today? And while we have our poll questions up, we're going to give away our first gift card. Our first gift card winner, as soon as I can find it, will be Mallory DeRoche from New Hampshire. Mallory will be reaching out to you after today's event, and we will give you instructions on how to collect your winnings. And don't forget, there's 2 more opportunities to win today. We'll be giving away another gift card shortly, and as another $300 Amazon gift card, as well as our best question gift card. We have a ton of questions coming in. We'll be taking some of these questions shortly, and we want to make sure that we have time to get to all of them. I'm going to share the results of this poll to show you sort of what people are where they are today in terms of tape. So there's only a few percent using just all tape, which doesn't make, isn't a lot of surprise at this point. There's a number of you still using a mix of disk and tape, and some of you have moved to all disk. And obviously that's sort of where we are. So that's a good thing. And we're going to move on with our next segment, and then we'll be doing some more interview with a UK MSP, some Q&A, and another gift card. Thanks. Now, I know we just talked to Mark and Abdul about what FalconStor is bringing to the world, but I think it's important to make sure that there's a sense of clarity on exactly what StoreSafe is and what it does before we continue on. I'm going to put a slide on your screen right now that'll show you some of the benefits that FalconStor is bringing to the world with StoreSafe. First of all, StoreSafe is a software-only backup-to-disk solution. It's a virtual tape library solution. And I'll talk about why that's important in just a second. It scales to 4 petabytes on-premises and unlimited petabytes in the cloud. This means that even the largest environments can benefit from what StoreSafe is doing. It brings 6 times faster improvement to most backup environments. This is 6x faster than tape, and this is great when we start talking about shrinking backup windows, which are still a thing that many organizations have challenges with. StoreSafe delivers up to 320 terabytes per hour of throughput. You're not going to see that with a lot of tape solutions on the market. Even more impressive, FalconStor indicates that they're going to bring 20-to-1 deduplication as a global backup target. Now, the reason I say it that way is because when we talk to Mike later, you're going to hear that his customers are seeing something that is significantly greater than 20-to-1. FalconStor is being pretty cautious here with the number, which is really good for them to do, but real-world experience is proving something even better than what FalconStor is claiming. And 20-to-1 is absolutely spectacular, but what customers are seeing is even better. And what customers are experiencing with StoreSafe is a 90% savings in cost without the need to forklift their existing environments. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second as well. And FalconStor has hundreds of active resellers and MSPs worldwide delivering on the StoreSafe solution. And on your screen, you'll also see that FalconStor is partnering with the world's biggest companies to bring this solution to market. So they support backup and restore partners including ArcServe and Commvault, Veeam, Oracle, Veritas, the whole 9 yards. Pretty much what most of us are running in our environments, FalconStor can support with StoreSafe. On the cloud partner front for storage capacity, Microsoft Azure, IBM Cloud, AWS, Wasabi. So FalconStor is able to help you partner with the world's biggest clouds from AWS to very budget-friendly challengers, including Wasabi. And that's fantastic for your budget and for your growing data capacity needs when it comes to backup and recovery. But StoreSafe also works with on-premises solutions, including your local SAN providers from such as Hitachi, Pure Storage, IBM, HPE, Dell, all of the above, as well as local object storage partners, including IBM, Hitachi, and Dell EMC. At present, FalconStor has thousands of customers and over an exabyte of data under management. That's huge. That's really significant and something I think should give people a level of comfort that FalconStor knows what they're doing. And they have some incredibly big names when it comes to customers that are protecting their data with StoreSafe. And that's a testament to what they've built. Some of the things that I like about StoreSafe are, number one, I was a CIO for a long time. One of the things that I never liked was a forklift upgrade, especially when it came to my data protection environment. So when I had to replace data backup software, essentially, I would have to keep old tape libraries on hand, and I would have to keep copies of the original backup software on hand just to satisfy retention requirements. So if I switched from one product to another, for whatever the retention period was for what I still had being supported by the old product, I would have to keep that online and patched and current just in case I ever had to restore that old data from that old system. That can get expensive, and that can also really put RTO at risk when it comes to having to recover in the event of an emergency or a disaster. The more systems you have to bring online to make something work, especially old systems that may not be as well supported as you'd like, the more at risk your recovery time objective becomes. And that's something I don't think can be overlooked, especially in a world that is literally 24/7 for most organizations these days. Second, I really was loath to throw away existing investments. There have been things I liked about my existing backup software, but it just didn't support at the time, for example, the cloud provider that I wanted, or I couldn't store it to a local storage array that I was already using. So I would either have to go buy something that really didn't fit my environment, which operationally is not desirable, or I would have to go find another storage solution. What FalconStor does is essentially install a shim into my environment. Now that word, some people don't like that word, but I like it in this context because essentially what they're doing is I can bring a virtual tape library into any supported backup software. And that virtual tape library becomes a device that backup software can just use natively. And I think that's really important. You don't have to make any architectural changes to your backup software to support what FalconStor is bringing with StoreSafe. And now you have the power of the cloud behind you and of any local storage you want. If you have backup software that doesn't like the storage array that you're trying to use, for example, FalconStor can make that work. Or if you have backup software that you'd like to store your backups in Wasabi, for example, FalconStor can do that for you as well, by virtue of the fact that it's using this virtual tape library. And to keep your data protected, essentially FalconStor is sharding the data among a whole bunch of specialized containers that they are then storing in lots of different places, just like you would want with any regular backup solution. And to recover that data, you get enough of the containers back, and FalconStor puts them back together and can recover your entire environment, even if you have containers that are spread across multiple clouds, disk storage arrays on site, and wherever. And so essentially, you're able to store your data wherever, whenever you need it, and FalconStor keeps track of where it all is, and as you need to recover, it pulls it back from wherever it's stored, without regard for what the backup software supported originally, and it can help you rebuild your environment in the event of a disaster. So what they've done is install a tool into your backup environment that essentially brings a level of agnosticism to the environment that we really haven't seen before. It doesn't matter what your backup software is, it doesn't matter what your storage is, and in large part it doesn't matter what your cloud is. FalconStor can use any of the above to help you accelerate your data protection and archive goals in a way that's extremely friendly to your budget. You get a choice of what you want to use for backup software, so whether you need something that's more robust or something that provides you with a wider set of options, it doesn't matter. If you would rather use a more expensive provider such as AWS as a backup target, or a more budget-friendly provider such as Wasabi, it doesn't matter. FalconStor brings you a level of choice that we haven't seen in data protection software in a very long time. And so I'm really impressed by what they've done. I do think that their 20-to-1 deduplication target, as I've mentioned before, it sounds too good to be true, but it's actually proving out to be not even what they're able to, not even what the best they can do. As we'll hear from Mike Borum from Blue Chip shortly, he's seen 80 and 100-to-1 deduplication ratios across their target backup customers. And I think that's pretty incredible. But obviously, backups, it's not unusual to see higher deduplication rates on backups just because of the uniformity of the data that's being managed. But to see 80 to 100-to-1 ratios is still pretty incredible, and it really helps you understand just how powerful this software can be in terms of helping you rein in what can be out-of-control costs in a backup environment. So we're going to be talking to Mike Borum again a little bit later from Blue Chip to hear his experience. But we're also going to do some Q&A shortly with the FalconStor folks about what they're actually doing with the software. After we talk to Mike, we'll do a Q&A with him. And I thank you again for attending today's event. And I hope you've learned a lot so far, and there's a lot more to come. So I did the gift card a little bit early, but we're going to be asking you one more poll question, then moving on with our presentation. And the question is, how much data are you protecting today? Up to 500 terabytes, somewhere up to a petabyte, 1 to 3 petabytes, or do you have something just a bit more substantial at 3+ petabytes? Obviously, FalconStor can support any of the above, but it's interesting to understand sort of where people are in terms of what they actually have to protect. It's actually pretty incredible just how far this can scale, and we'll be actually hearing about that a little bit in some of the Q&A segments that we do, because we have some really good questions around that. In fact, one of the questions we have right now is from Mr. Gong, who is asking, how is it priced per terabyte per system? We're going to answer that question shortly in the event today. I'm going to bring up the results of this poll so you can kind of see where you fall in terms of the rest of the audience. And a lot of you, no, not surprised, are under 500 terabytes, but a lot of you are above that. So there's about a half and half mix of below and above 500 terabytes of protection. And we want to know what you're running. So as you know, FalconStor can work with literally any of the above. If you have more than one, please tell us. We'd like to understand what people are running, because it's important to know just how well the software is going to work in everybody's environments. I see so far a lot of Veeam, which is not a surprise, and a lot of other. So there's a lot of you running things that are not on the list. We obviously didn't make this an exhaustive list, but I'm going to close the poll here in just a second so we can continue on. I don't want to take too much time on this, but this is handy information to help us understand where our audience is in their data protection and archive journey. And I apologize if you hadn't had time yet, but I'm going to click the results button. And as I mentioned, Veeam and other are the clear winners. And we're going to continue on with our event. So Abdul, one of the big things that organizations are really looking for these days are solutions that bring analytics to front and center in everything they're doing. So they can do capacity planning, so they can just do ongoing planning. What does StoreSafe bring to an organization to help them gain more visibility into their backup environments?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Scott. And we have seen this a lot from our customers. They want to be able to have visibility and see all their SLAs are met. StoreSafe is managed by our web GUI server, which is what we call Storesight, and that comes fully loaded with some very good features that our customers are very excited about it. For those that are using it, at least, there are rules and alerts that you can have. There are smart rules that we put in that you can decide what is it that you want to be alerted on. You can get text message or you can get email notification on that. Capacity information per client level, per server level, per storage pool level, or a physical device level. Very important, in an MSP environment, for example, right? So you get that capacity prediction, and that capacity prediction is very smart, is based on your own usage for the past month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever that time frame is, how you have used it. We predict this is where you're running out, so you can plan, or the customer can plan accordingly. We have chargeback, for example, where you can say what is the minimum cashback with discount from MSP perspective. It's a very frequently asked feature from our MSP customers, where they can set a price or they can give a discount, and all the reporting you see there. So some very good features in terms of analytics and reporting and smart rules and all that. That's within the Storesight.
So it sounds like the analytics feature is helping individual customers do better capacity planning, knowing when they have to add more, or what where things are. And for your MSP customers, it's enabling a chargeback mechanism that helps them help their customers do better, and helps them obviously make some money too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Abdul, with all this data that's being collected, I mean, obviously FalconStor can probably help customers with it in some way. What are some of the ways that you are helping your customers do better with their backup environments with the data that's being gathered from their systems?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a tons of data that we collect from client level, storage level, network level, fiber channel level, and as part of my team, our responsibility is to work with these customers when they're planning their capacity and go over these numbers. This is the trend. Like I mentioned earlier, there's trend reports, there are custom trends that can be created and generated by the customers, but we go through with customer every step of the way to make sure that the right decisions are made and that they are fully aware of their environment and how they are utilizing and their expectations are met.
So Abdul, you work with specific customers. Now, I know you can't always name names, but if you had to think about, a specific customer and some of the challenges that they were seeing, what have they overcome when it comes to these environments with StoreSafe?
So, of course, there are a lot of customers that I can name, but just over the past week, I visited with a customer who does not have a good handle on their front end, on all the environments that are being backed up. And so they want to look at how much ingest is coming, how much data is getting replicated on the server level and stuff like that. So we generate all these reports and we go step by step with them to explain to them. And so at the end of the day, everything makes sense for them.
And so how did StoreSafe help them? What was better at the end of the day once you gathered all this data and you were able to do something with it? What did they actually do that was actionable to address those concerns or those findings?
Yeah, so the data actually helped us to fix the backup regime, and there were some corrective actions that were taken on the front end, how the data needs to be backed up. Instead of doing a full backup every day, maybe they should do it every week, for example, some workloads that were not supposed to be backed up. And so that eventually helps them in better understanding their capacity, and the capacity prediction gives them those details. So overall, having a greater command and control over the entire environment from front end to the back end consolidation.
So rather than just basically helping the customer replace or extend the capabilities they already had, you're able to help them make operational improvements that even gave them further benefit than just from the product itself. But you're using the intelligence you gathered from the product to help them make those operational changes that are so critical to them being successful with what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. We're always very involved with our customers because, again, we want less support calls. And so a better operation from their side means less support calls from us. So yeah, absolutely. And StoreSafe is giving us those data points to be able to discuss as a partner. We're considered partners with all our customers. Their success is our success. Less support calls, happy customer. Everybody loves that. So yes.
All right, we have some questions from the audience for Mark and Abdul. The first one is for you, Abdul, and I'm going to be reading my screen to get it. How does FalconStor StoreSafe help me address security and ransomware concerns in my organization?
Thanks, Scott. FalconStor StoreSafe is installed on a hardened Linux OS, and our deduplication enables us to keep data on a block level that has no context for outsiders. It's just on a block level unique data that is not susceptible to a ransomware. It's not file level deduplication as some competitors do it. It's really on the block level, and that's not susceptible to attack.
All right. Mark, is there a way to configure this for active-active versus active-passive capabilities?
Absolutely. Many of our customers, most of our customers set up a dual configuration to protect their backup repositories. And depending on the customer, they have that choice. One customer in particular that we work with has 2 data centers. It's an active-active pair, and each one of them replicates to the active StoreSafe at the other site. So that's a very common configuration for us where there's multiple sites in an enterprise.
Excellent, thank you. We have some more questions from our audience for Mark and Abdul. Abdul, what does FalconStor do about the cost of the cloud when it comes to backup?
FalconStor solution offers deduplication that reduces the data or the storage footprint in the cloud by 95%, hence giving you a cheaper storage because you're using less, and also the egress fee is because of this deduplication capability. It saves you on the egress fee when you're retrieving that data.
And Mark, we have an associated question I'm going to ask you right now that's along the lines for deduplication. And it's, what is different about FalconStor's dedupe from everyone else?
Several things. The fact that we are, number one, context aware, where we do understand what tape software was sent to us, so we can offset around that. We know how to deal with what is inserted by the tape software. Number two, it's a block level deduplication. We use a sliding window to find the best matches in the deduplication. It's a technology we've been developing literally for close to 20 years now, with several patents on it. So we believe we've put in a lot of tricks to do the absolute best job of reduction.
Very good, thank you. And we've got some more questions from the audience. Abdul, this one's going to be for you. What does FalconStor do to help automate data protection? We're overloaded with too many applications and too few people for all of this. What can you do to help?
Our solution really gives that consolidated view. One GUI, you can do anything. You could see your backups, you could see your libraries, your physical libraries, virtual libraries. Everything can be consolidated from or managed from one management GUI, and also automated. All the policies, replication, exporting and importing of containers or tapes could all be automated, and you get alerts and reports on everything, make sure that everything is working as expected.
Great, thank you. Some more questions from the audience for Mark and Abdul. Mark, this one's for you, and it's around data validity. There's got to be some kind of a difference in validating data when it comes to tape or the data containers that you're storing in the cloud. How are you using containers for that validation?
That's a great question, and one that we think that there's a lot of differentiation for StoreSafe also. I mean, if you think about trying to validate tapes that you've sent off to Iron Mountain, how would that happen? Well, you've got to bring them back to your data center. You've got to mount all the tapes. You've got to be able to basically rerun every tape to make sure that it's still intact the way that you originally recorded it. When we export to the containers with the dedupe data, we add checksums within those containers. And one of the reasons that we chose an industry standard container for our exports is that we can also run a program basically from that container. And what we do is put the checksum in when we build the container, and at any time you can kick off a validation where it will recalculate the checksum compared to the original and give you status, whether it's good or bad. So you can imagine thousands of containers out in the cloud. You could put it on just a policy that, say, once a month, you want all of them to validate themselves and give you the answer. And on a single screen, you can see a field of green because they're all still validated and in good shape. If one is not, then you could take corrective action, get it fixed.
Very good. Thank you for that answer. All right, so we have another question from the audience for Mark and Abdul, and this one is around scale. So essentially, when do you need to scale beyond a single node? And if so, how do you do that with FalconStor StoreSafe?
Twofold. Number one, if it's performance, obviously, or if it's capacity, you can do it on both. In both cases, you would just add another FalconStor server, and you will also add the capacity on the back end and expand the repository. So it's very scalable. You don't have to start big. You can start small and then go as your needs grow.
Excellent. Thank you. Another question for Mark and Abdul. This one is for Mark. This one is, my organization wants to adopt some kind of a backup as a service offering. How does FalconStor StoreSafe help me make this happen?
Yeah, backup as a service, and I'll use an example. Some of quite a few an MSP who have a number of customers using them as a backup service, and we fully support this. We have a multi-tenant architecture, so you can isolate different customers. They can only see their own portion of the backups. It also gives you multi-tiers of security so that customer A doesn't wander into customer B data or their backups. So we have a very partitioned, secure architecture to make backup of it as a service very successful. We also can show you the results and the analytics at an individual customer level as opposed to the full system.
Great, thank you so much. And we have more questions. And so I'm going to ask this one. I'm going to ask this one of you again, Mark. StoreSafe initially captures backup data to local block storage. A few questions. How much local capacity is required for StoreSafe to operate?
Well, we believe, we've been talking about our deduplication and compression technologies, which, depending on your dedupe ratio, means the amount that you have to store locally in the repository can be much smaller than what you're actually backing up. We can start you with a very small repository, 5, 10 terabytes, whatever your needs are. As they grow over the years, as your capacity requirements increase, you can add more storage on there, up to the point of just shy of 4 petabytes for a system. At that point, we would certainly, by that time, we would suggest that you start archiving some of that off to another location, like to the cloud, so that you don't have to ever get that big with a local repository. But we give you a lot of flexibility in making that decision.
Excellent, thank you. All right, we have another question from the audience. This one's going to be for Abdul. The question is around recovery, especially since data is compressed and deduped. It stands to reason that the original backup software in StoreSafe would be required in a recovery scenario. If the original StoreSafe server is lost due to a disaster or security issue, how does reconstruction take place?
So from a configuration standpoint, you're covered by high availability on the local site and between StoreSafe and StoreSafe. So if one is gone, the other server can take over the personality and give it that restore. If replication is enabled, you would be able to recall the replica copy. If this is just a standalone server, we still have ways of restoring our single StoreSafe server from the configuration repository that we automatically save out on regular intervals. Either on existing hardware or a brand new hardware. So you will be able to do the restore of your backups.
Excellent, thank you. And we have another question. This is from Mark, and it's around security again. Essentially, we have encryption keys that we have to deal with somewhere because data is encrypted on your appliance. But where are encryption keys stored, and how are they kept available in the event of a disaster?
Yeah, that's a great question. Today, we do keep the encryption keys encoded within the StoreSafe platform so that they don't get handled by a user, admins, et cetera. It's all self-contained within the platform. But also, if the data is replicated to another site, of course, we need the encryption keys so we can be able to restore to that site too. So it's a StoreSafe to StoreSafe private communication.
Perfect, thank you. Mark, we have a very important question that we have to ask, and that's around how is FalconStor licensed? How do I buy this thing?
It is a capacity license, and as we've mentioned, our management interface, Storesight, is a single screen that can manage all of your FalconStor servers within an enterprise. So it is a sum total of all the capacity that you're using. So it's a single license for an enterprise customer that covers all of the used capacity within the environment.
So it doesn't matter how many StoreSafe servers I have, it just matters how much capacity I have under management.
That is correct.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And as we get close to the end of today's event, there's a critical question that we need to get an answer to. And that's, how can you learn more and actually give StoreSafe a try for yourself? Abdul, how can people that are interested in improving their backup environments with StoreSafe learn more, and how can they actually kick the tires on it a little bit?
There are multiple approaches to that. Obviously, we can give them a demo to kind of show them the software in action, but also work with them to deploy it as a POC within their environment to make sure that we can back up their data, real data, and show them the real results. So we can do POCs, we can do in-house POC with them, we can do in their data center. There are multiple ways to achieve that.
And if they want to reach out to FalconStor, they should just go to falconstore.com and fill out and contact you?
That is correct. They can go to support and then just contact support, and we'll handle it from there. Yep.
That sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll be moving on with our next segment here. Don't forget to ask good questions. There'll be more poll questions coming up later in the event. We're getting close to the end. We're going to be hearing from Blue Chip here shortly. So please keep those questions coming in. And now I'm pleased to introduce Mike Borum, pre-sales consultant with Blue Chip. Mike, thanks for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about Blue Chip before we get started?
Good afternoon. Thanks for the invite. My name is Mike. I'm from Blue Chip. I've been with the company for 12 years now, and I'm a pre-sales consultant. Blue Chip are a managed services provider, offering services remotely and via our 2 data centers in the UK.
So Blue Chip is a heavy user of FalconStor. Can you give us sort of the introduction into why you chose FalconStor and some of the primary benefits it's bringing to your customers? We'll get into a deeper discussion on this over the next little bit here.
When Blue Chip decided to go into tapeless backup, we looked at a number of products and found that FalconStor was the easiest to deploy, the most scalable and flexible, and was a very reliable product that gave us fantastic dedupe ratios that enabled us to do lots of wonderful things that we couldn't do with tape.
Now, there's lots of appliances out there that will do things like dedupe and stuff like that, like data domain. Where does FalconStor sort of excel when you compared it against some of those other solutions?
Yeah, so we found that FalconStor give us some leverage in the IBMI power space in particular. It allowed us to do bare metal restores directly from FalconStor virtual tapes, rather than having to use physical tape or DVDs to boot the system, which you would have to do with data domain. We also found that the dedupe ratio was far, far greater using FalconStor than other products.
So let's get into that a little bit. What kind of a dedupe ratio are you seeing in your customer base using FalconStor?
So on the IBMI platform, we're regularly seeing over 100 to 1 dedupe ratio, and in some environments which have got huge databases, we're seeing figures that way exceed that.
What kind of hardware do you use in your cloud to support the FalconStor environment?
So primarily we're an IBMI shop, so most of our data center appliances are Lenovo based. However, recently we've been using a lot of Dell kit out in the field. So we supply some units out to remote customers, and with the FalconStor software pre-configured, they replicate the data back into Blue Chip, and we can operate disaster recovery services from our data centers in Bedford. We do that for a number of customers in the UK and in America as well.
Now, I asked the question about, server brands and stuff like that, but the reality is it doesn't really matter, does it? I mean, FalconStor runs on pretty much anything. Yeah,
FalconStor will run on lots and lots of different shapes and sizes of kit, from very basic entry-level configurations all the way up to clusters of servers with lots of memory and flash disks and so on and so forth.
So when we start thinking about modern organizations, we think about scale and sprawl and companies being sort of spread all over the planet. And there's a lot of those kinds of locations that aren't going to have reliable and robust and performant internet connectivity. How does the FalconStor solution work in organizations that might be bandwidth constrained or that might have less than ideal conditions from a connectivity perspective?
FalconStor is actually really good at that. And in fact, the more you throw at the FalconStor application, the better the dedupe ratio becomes. It's a global dedupe ratio. So small internet connections, ADSL connections are really not an issue. We can even throttle the appliances so that they can use just the very smallest amount of bandwidth.
So one of the benefits of the solution is basically it's moving delta blocks, right? It's not having to move everything every night to do a data backup or to archive to the to various clouds and things like that. And my understanding is that that's one of the claims to fame for the FalconStor solution in terms of its reliability and performance when it comes to internet connectivity. How are your customers experiencing this? Are they seeing really great benefits from a networking standpoint with the FalconStor solution?
They see lots of benefits from the FalconStor solution. They've got a reliable solution that works every day. It's automated. It's monitored. You don't have to get involved. Blue Chip put our service wrap around the FalconStor products. But to be honest, we don't have to do a lot of work. It does what it says on the tin.
So from a deployment perspective, I mean, organizations are sort of, I would say, skeptical when it comes to claims of it's really easy to deploy anything that's going to touch the backup environment, because we've heard the horror stories about, tape library compatibility with future versions of software or even future tapes and things like that. Or, claims about it really works with, different kinds of storage. But FalconStor is a bit different. I mean, you don't have to do a rip and replace. I mean, what kind of a deployment experience are your customers seeing when they deploy the FalconStor StoreSafe solution?
In many cases, and it's a very high percentage, we have absolutely no impact during installation, configuration, and go live. Customers do not have to reboot servers or anything like that. It's very, very behind the scenes. In many cases, especially for the IBM platform, it's just a change in device name. So yesterday they were backing up on TAPO 1, and today they're backing up on TAPO 2.
So when we think about the Blue Chip Cloud, how many customers do you have using StoreSafe, and what kind of capacity under management do you have?
So we've got around about 15 petabytes of raw storage on the shop floor across our managed service customers in the 2 data centers. There's a lot more out in the field at customers' own sites, and we manage that all through 2 main clusters, one in each of our data centers.
For your customers, what's their reaction to the price tag that they're seeing with their backup and recovery once they deploy the FalconStor solution? Are there concerns? Do they look at it and say, "Wow, this is great"? Or I mean, what kind of a reaction do you see?
So initially, it's always, wow, that's more than tape. But hey, it is more than tape. And once we speak about the benefits, automation, flexibility, scalability, security, all those kinds of things, that price is forgotten.
Yeah, and when we look at the solution itself, I mean, tape is cheap. That's one of the things that people. That's one of the reasons it's stayed around for so long. Is it's just a cheap medium, but it's cheap for a reason. And, there's a lot of drawbacks to a tape-only architecture that we all know and hate, right? I mean, there's just challenges to overcome. So it's not a surprise to hear that it's a little bit more expensive than tape, but the ability to deploy essentially a new backup infrastructure without a forklift, I would assume, is music to people's ears at some point during the discussions.
Oh, for sure. And it goes back to this ease of deployment, the flexibility, the ability to grow and scale up as time goes on. We add capacity on the fly. We change configuration on the fly. We don't need to carry out heavy configuration changes. It's all very easy. It's done through the FalconStor GUI, and that makes life easy for a managed service provider like Blue Chip.
So this might be a tough one to answer. You don't have to name names, but if you had to choose a favorite StoreSafe deployment story, is there one that stands out that's like, this was a real challenge, but we ended up solving some real business critical issues with the deployment?
Yeah, we have a large pharmaceutical organization who uses the FalconStor products across the globe. We had many challenges, many small countries with those small unreliable connections that you speak about. We were able to deploy in each country, replicate the data back to our data centers in Bedford, and provide tier 1 services for managed recovery.
Mike, when you have customers that are expressing interest in FalconStor and you're speccing a solution for them, what are some of the points of discussion or questions that they might have that you have to help them with during those discussions?
The questions are actually few and far between. It's a very easy process. We need to understand the size of the environment, the amount of data the customer wants to back up, and how long they want to keep it. It almost is as simple as that. We have a really good set of tools that allow us to calculate those numbers and come up with a predefined configuration and a financial proposal.
One of the things I like about what I just heard is there's very little discussion about needing to have, discussions around what we would call nerd knobs in some ways. Like what dials do we have to tweak to make this work, in the best way possible and stuff like that. It sounds like there's a focus on the intended outcomes, and the FalconStor StoreSafe solution provides those inputs without a lot of thought. Is that an accurate statement?
It's a very accurate statement. There's very little effort that goes into creating a right fit. There's no special equipment. There are no special this or special that. It's a platform agnostic backup service.
In terms of some of the things that have impacted the world in recent months or years, I guess at this point, COVID. How has COVID changed organizations' perspective on data protection, and has this increased interest in some ways around what FalconStor is bringing to the table with StoreSafe?
Yeah, for sure. The pandemic gave us a number of challenges. I think we all agree that, and in particular, a lot of organizations lost the ability to manage tape physically. They couldn't go on site. They couldn't use tape carrier services. They couldn't move around as freely as they did before. So FalconStor gave us the opportunity to do that quick and easy deployment that we spoke about, and to automate the whole backup process and delivery of that data off-site. Customer no longer needs to worry about going on site to change a tape and somewhere safe to store it.
Yeah, there's definitely some beauty in it, essentially installing, for what all intents and purposes, is a shim into an existing environment without disrupting anything, and be able to configure that shim to spit data wherever it needs to go. I mean, I would imagine that's increased the level of flexibility that organizations have around their backup and retention and archival in some pretty significant ways. Especially as we stick in this remote, who knows how long we'll be in a new remote reality.
Yeah, for sure.
It's going to be kind of things that a lot of people have to think about, isn't it?
And in many cases, Scott, it's enabled customers who have taken that leap away from tape to see how great it is and to expand upon it. And the possibilities are almost endless, and we've seen that in many companies. They've taken the jump, taken the leap of faith. They're using Blue Chip and the FalconStor product, and they love it. They feel safe with it. They feel safe knowing that it's looked after and monitored, and they expand on that.
I don't think there's any better testimonial than that, and I think that's a good place for us to wrap. Mike, thank you very much for this discussion about the actual real world, real customer view that people are seeing with FalconStor and StoreSafe. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity. We have a long-term partnership with FalconStor, and long may that continue.
So one of the things that we're hearing today is there's a lot of goodness in the FalconStor StoreSafe solution. And I can imagine some people thinking, this seems too good to be true. And if I were a customer looking at some of these benefits, I would have the same questions. How do you, and have you heard that objection? And what do you do to overcome it and prove that this is in fact the real deal?
Thanks for the question. It's a good question, and we have seen that objection. It becomes less and less because of the amount of clients we have using the FalconStor products with Blue Chip. We've got over 300 systems in the data centers, all backing up to FalconStor without any use of physical tape. And we are able to demonstrate those recovery points, and we are able to demonstrate that data is there and ready to be used whenever the customer wants it.
Mike, one of the things that people have to contend with is things around regulatory compliance and security of backup and archive data. How does FalconStor help enable those things, and how do you overcome any potential objections around compliance and security of the solution?
Well, that's a great question, Scott. We have a fantastic encryption model with the FalconStor product, and we can also use encryption on the storage appliances as well. So you've got double encryption there. We've got a number of customers who are in industries which are heavily regulated. Those regulation controls have been applied to FalconStor and the appliances and the software and the encryption, and it all stands up. It meets regulation every time.
And we have another question from our audience for Mike. One of the things that we see a lot of IT pros want are, what I call nerd knobs and dials to turn up things like dedupe and compression and try to be able to control that. But we don't want that if we can avoid it. How does FalconStor help maximize the outcomes these people are trying to achieve without having to expose complex controls?
It's really easy with a FalconStor product because it does it all itself. There's very, very little for us to fiddle with, us IT nerds don't really like that. But that's why it's such a stable product. That's why it gives us a fantastic reliability record, because there's nothing to break.
And that's really good. I mean, I'm a big fan of simplicity in outcomes and technology solutions, and often they're hard to find. And one of the things I find is that simplicity is actually really hard from the vendor perspective. If something's simple, it means that the vendor's done their homework on making it that way for the end user. And I'm sure you're seeing that with FalconStor.
We are. It's a simple product. It does what it says it does every time. It's reliable. It's flexible. There's so many reasons why we use it across our business.
Mike, without FalconStor, what would Blue Chip have done to manage the increase in number of tenants and capacity under management for backup and archive?
You know what, Scott? That would have been a complete headache. As our customer base has grown, we've gone in excess of 300 platforms in the data centers. To back that up using tape would have been tape hell. FalconStor has enabled us to implement a system and a process that works all day, every day. It backs up these customers, it protects their data, and it allows us to recover it when we need to. We've reduced our human input for backup by 95+%. It's really, really allowed us to grow the business.
So expand on what you mean by you reduced human input into backup 95%. That's a really important statistic.
Yeah, so if we take 300 systems and we have to load a tape, at least one tape, and we have to unload that tape and load it again every day, we've got to take it off site and we've got to store it. That takes people. and that takes their time away from an effort away from doing something that's far more valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't considered it like that. So that's a really important part of the equation that people need to think about in terms of when it comes to their backup and archive. So thank you for making sure that that our audience has that top of mind. And we have one more question for Mike, and it's around SLAs, RPOs, RTOs, things like that. How do you manage SLAs in a FalconStor environment to make sure that recoverability can meet business objectives?
That's a great question, and all of our customers are different. They're all bespoke in their own way. They have different needs and different regulations they need to comply to. So with the FalconStor product, it's really easy to tune the RPO and the RTO based on the customer's requirements with very, very little change.
Very good. Mike, thank you very much. And I would like to thank all of our presenters and our guests today. That was a fantastic and robust discussion. I hope everyone learned a lot. We have one or possibly two more questions for you, and we're also going to give away another Amazon gift card. The first question is, what's your main approach to off-site data protection? Do you have a disk at a second site, tape, public cloud, or some combination of the three? So I'd love to get your thoughts on that. Then we'll have one more question during which we will be giving away our second $300 Amazon gift card of today's event. Again, thank you to Mark, to the folks from FalconStor as well as from Blue Chip today. It's always nice to get actual customers like Blue Chip on events like this so that you can see exactly how they're using the kind of products that we're talking about in these events. And I'm going to close the poll for this question and launch to the next one. And then I'm going to show you the results first. A lot of you are using this somewhere else. No question, no surprise on tape, given the previous poll. A lot of you are already using public cloud, and many of you are using all three. Our final question is going to be around, how would you like to learn more? Do you want to learn more from a data sheet, another webinar, some case studies, some pricing information? When it comes to learning more about StoreSafe, how would you like FalconStor to reach out and sort of help you understand the solution? So with this poll question up on the screen, this is a really important one. We're going to be giving away our second gift card. I'm going to do it in just a second. I want to let some more people respond to this question first. All right. Our second gift card winner is Jay Lineberry, I believe, from Illinois. Jay and Mallory DeRoche are our winners for today's gift card. We'll be picking our best question gift card out from actually a ton of questions that we got in from our audience today. And we'll be reaching out to you after today's event with information on how to collect your winnings. So as always, thank you to everyone for attending today's event. I'm going to leave this poll question up on the screen for a few more minutes. So please make sure you take time to answer this question. Thank you to everyone for attending. Thank you to FalconStor for their partnership on this event. And thank you to our great presenters for making this a fantastic, robust, and in-depth discussion on a revolutionary new product to help us all do better with data protection and archive.